Hey everybody, Mr. Duker back again with 5 fast facts about the Korean War. Let's get started. Number 1, the 38th parallel. So after World War II, Korea was one of many countries that actually got split into two, right? You got your East and West Germany, North and South Vietnam, and your North and South Korea. These two countries were split across the 38th parallel. This is one of those latitude-longitude lines you see on a globe. It's the invisible lines that help with navigation and placement. So it's kind of in the halfway point, and so the two countries were split at this area. North Korea was communist, while the South Korea was democratic, and those are the two different sides. 2, it was a Cold War conflict. So again, after World War II, you see a lot of small wars between communist nations and Soviet Union supported communist nations, and the United States supported democratic capitalist nations. And this is one of the very, very first conflicts in the the early stages of the Cold War. So 1950, World War II was only 5 years old when this happens. And North Korea invades the South, trying to unify the peninsula and just make it all Korea instead of North and South. South Korea is trying to defend itself, but they were kind of unprepared, a little bit weak militarily, and really needed some help because in the beginning of the war, they did not do very well. And the communists were aggressive and attacked because they really thought that the West, the United States, wouldn't care. They wouldn't come to the rescue. It's just Korea, not that big a deal. So they were expecting that they could invade and kind of get a free pass on this. They really weren't expecting the United States to assist South Korea, and South Korea really needed some help because they did not do good in the beginning of the war. 3, it's one of the first Cold War tests for the United States and the United Nations. So again, this is in the Cold War, but this is early in the Cold War, and we're still trying to figure out, what are we going to do? How are we going to try and deal with all these conflicts that pop up? What did not help is the year before, China, which was an ally of ours in World War II, actually fell to communism and became one of the largest communist countries in the world, right? Korea is right next door to China, and the United States was damn sure that they were not going to let another country fall to communism early in the Cold War. So they would go to great lengths to try and stop communist expansion, and this is called containment. This is a policy you'll see often during the rest of the Cold War. It's why we did what we did in Vietnam. It's why we were there in Germany, West Germany, to try and stop the communists from expanding there. Basically, not trying to destroy communism, but we're trying to stop it from spreading. Containment is basically another way of saying quarantine. So basically, we're trying to quarantine communism. What's also interesting is that when the United States sent forces to fight, and it was mostly American it was mostly American forces that fought in the Korean War, if you weren't from Korea yourself. They did so under the flag of the United Nations. This is also one of the first tests for the UN, which was created after World War II to promote world peace and keep the world a safe place. Well, now you got another war popping up, and what is the United Nations going to do? Again, are they going to look the other way and ignore this problem, or are they going to step up and meet force with force? And so the United Nations does that. But again, it's one of the first times the United Nations is trying to fight a war, I guess you could say, to stop it from getting bigger. And even though it was mostly a lot of other countries fought in the Korean War, again, it was mostly American forces, but they did so under the flag of the United Nations. It was a United Nations effort. It was a worldwide effort, mostly U.S., but United Nations effort that fought in the war. 4, the Korean War is largely a stalemate. So the war is kind of like a yo-yo in the beginning. In the beginning of the war, the North advances pretty far down the southern peninsula. Then when the United States finally is able to get some troops into South Korea, they're able to push the North back up. But then when they have some help from the Chinese, they're able to fight their way back down. So the entire war, they're going up and down this peninsula until finally it just becomes a stalemate, a tie around the 38th parallel where everything began. And then so for years, this is just where the war it kind of ended up. It's kind of got more in common with World War I and a war of attrition and stalemate and digging in trenches than the big battle of movements and stuff that you saw in World War II. Again, probably because it's a peninsula and you're surrounded by water on three sides. There's only so many ways to go. You're kind of going up or you're kind of going down, right? And this is very frustrating, and the war just, nobody wanted this war, and it's not going away, and you can't really win it easily. It was kind of interesting that the commander who was put in charge to win the war, a guy named Douglas MacArthur, a hero from World War II, finally decided it would take no less than 34 atomic bombs to end the war. So he had actually drawn up plans. He was good. Remember, we only dropped 2 atomic bombs to end World War II in Japan. MacArthur wanted 34. 34 targets needed to be nuked. If we did that, then I can win this war. That was a no-go, and so he was fired by President Truman. Other reasons, too. MacArthur was kind of talking bad about the president in the newspapers and stuff like that. But again, it's quite the stalemate. And 34 atomic bombs probably would have ended the war, but you would really have no winners at that point, and the war could get bigger, and you could have like a World War III, which nobody wants that. Lastly, number 5, the war never ended. So again, it's a stalemate, and eventually both sides just kind of get tired of this war where there's no end in sight and nobody can get an advantage. And so finally a truce, a armistice is signed on July 27th, 1953, which is basically a ceasefire. It doesn't end the war, it just stopped the shooting. And ever since, we've technically still been at war with North Korea even to today. And when the war ended, very little changed. The two countries are still there. North Korea is still communist. South Korea is still democratic. And they're still divided across the 38th parallel today, which we call the DMZ, the demilitarized zone, which you can see in the photo right there. The current leaders of North and South Korea meeting to talk about maybe finally ending the war. But as of the recording of this video, 2020, the war, still technically at war, even though we're not really shooting each other. But again, very little changed from the Korean War. All right, there you go. That's the Korean War in a nutshell. 5 fast facts. Hope you understand it a little bit better. And thanks for watching. This is Mr. Duker again, Super Simplified Social Studies, and I'll catch you later. Bye.